We're out of ammo! We've been abandoned! A SEAL screamed, desperate in the valley. Enemy fighters poured down, rifles pressed close, laughing harshly. The entire team prepared for their final moments. Suddenly, from the mountain peak, gunfire echoed like thunder. One shot. The enemy commander dropped instantly. Everyone fell silent. Someone whispered, "There's a sniper up there." But who? Meet Reina Vasquez, 28 years old. Long brown hair, slender build, gentle face, but steel in her eyes. Former Kraken unit operative, now living anonymously, serving only as a medic and support staff. In the camp, she performed tasks nobody cared about. Mending boots for new recruits, sharing water with young soldiers after training, cleaning the practice range after everyone had left. Many soldiers whispered behind her back, "She's just a medic. Couldn't fire a decent shot to save her life." Someone that small, the battlefield will swallow her first. An old sergeant frowned. A sniper? Ridiculous. That's not a place for her. Reina didn't respond, just quietly cleaned her old scope, carving 3 small white dots on the rifle stock. Her ritual before each mission. When word came that SEALs were advancing into Batu Valley, she was assigned to observe from distance, with no authorization to engage. The other soldiers didn't understand her attachment to that rifle. To them, it was just another weapon. To Reina, it was an extension of herself she'd learned to trust completely. She knew every characteristic of the barrel, every minute adjustment needed for wind and temperature, every quirk in the trigger mechanism that affected accuracy. Long-range shooting is guesswork, the infantry would say. By the time you line up a shot, the target's moved. But Reina knew something they didn't. Precision shooting wasn't about speed. It was about patience, calculation, and the willingness to take responsibility for every bullet fired. During her downtime, she'd study meteorological data, memorizing wind patterns, temperature variations, atmospheric pressure changes. Information that seemed useless until it wasn't. The younger soldiers would ask why she spent so much time maintaining an old rifle. "Because it remembers every shot I've ever taken," she'd reply, "so I have to make sure each one was worth remembering." They didn't understand what she meant. Metal couldn't have memory. But Reina had learned that every shot fired changed both the weapon and the shooter. Her rifle bore evidence of previous engagements. Scratches from fieldwork, wear patterns from countless hours of practice, modifications made for specific mission requirements. Reina knew each mark, each adjustment. She could tell you which engagement had taught her a new technique, which miss had led to equipment improvements. Other snipers rotated through different weapon systems. Reina always requested the same rifle. They'd been through too much together to separate now. The camp's shooting instructors had stopped offering her additional training years ago. Not because she didn't need it, but because her skills exceeded what they could teach. A young recruit would later recall, "The night before they left, I saw her sitting alone cleaning her rifle under dim light, eyes like she knew something was about to happen." Reina Vasquez and her rifle were about to prove that sometimes the person you dismiss is exactly the guardian angel you need. In Batu Valley, the SEAL team walked into a carefully planned ambush. Ammunition dwindling rapidly, wounded soldiers scattered across the terrain, blood soaking into the earth. A young soldier screamed in desperation, "We're out of ammo! We've been abandoned!" Enemy fighters poured down the slopes, laughing harshly, weapons pressed against heads. The commander looked up, voice choking, "We're finished." On the ridge above, Reina watched the entire scene through her scope. Radio orders kept repeating, "Observe only. Do not engage." Reina gripped her rifle tighter, hands trembling slightly, whispering, "Bring them home." She breathed deeply, placing her crosshairs on the enemy commander, signaling the final assault. One shot. The gunfire echoed across the entire valley, the leader dropping where he stood. Both sides fell completely silent. SEAL radio crackled. "Who fired?" Raina pressed her transmit button gently, voice calm. "You're not dead yet. I'm bringing everyone home." But this wasn't just about disobeying orders. This was about a promise she'd made to herself long ago. During her time with Kraken Unit, Raina had seen too many good soldiers die because help arrived too late. She'd sworn that would never happen again if she could prevent it. The first shot had been calculated not just for accuracy, but for psychological impact. Eliminating the commander would create confusion, delay the final assault, buy time for the SEALs to reposition. Through her scope, she could see the enemy fighters looking around nervously, no longer certain they had overwhelming advantage. Raina's training kicked in completely. Years of advanced marksmanship, psychological warfare tactics, battlefield assessment skills. She wasn't just picking off targets randomly. She was systematically dismantling the enemy's tactical capabilities. Second shot eliminated the machine gunner who was sweeping toward wounded SEALs. Third shot took out the enemy sniper who was trying to locate her position. Each shot was fired from a slightly different position on the ridge, making it impossible for the enemy to pinpoint her location or coordinate counter-sniper fire. The SEALs began understanding that they weren't just receiving random support. Someone was providing professional overwatch, someone who understood their tactical situation completely. This isn't lucky shooting, the commander realized. This is expert marksmanship. Enemy forces began retreating, no longer confident in their numerical advantage. Without leadership coordination and key weapon systems, their ambush was collapsing. Raina continued providing cover fire as the SEALs began moving wounded teammates toward safer positions. Radio chatter revealed their amazement. "Whoever's up there knows exactly what we need." That's not just good shooting, that's tactical support. Through her scope, Raina could see the SEALs working together to extract their wounded. The sight filled her with satisfaction that had nothing to do with her marksmanship skills. This was why she'd learned to shoot in the first place. Not to take lives, but to preserve them. Not for the thrill of difficult shots, but for moments like this when accuracy meant the difference between soldiers coming home or being left behind. As darkness began falling, Raina fired her final shot, destroying the vehicle blocking the SEAL's escape route. The explosion lit up the valley, providing both tactical advantage and symbolic closure to the engagement. A wounded SEAL would later recount, "In that moment of despair, I heard that woman's voice over the radio. I didn't feel abandoned anymore." The SEALs moved along the mountainside, looking up toward the ridge. They could only see a small figure prone behind a rifle, never leaving position until they were safely clear. After the first shot, the entire battle dynamic shifted completely. Raina continued with calculated precision. Second shot eliminated the machine gun that was targeting wounded SEALs. Third shot pierced through the enemy sniper's scope, dropping him instantly on his position. Enemy forces panicked, thinking the SEALs had an entire support team positioned on the high ground. The commander shouted, "Retake the line!" SEALs began crawling backward, dragging wounded teammates to safer positions. Raina fired methodical shots, cutting off every avenue of enemy attack. A young soldier in the team whispered, "That's not a medic. That's a sniper." As darkness descended, Raina fired her final shot, exploding the vehicle blocking the retreat route, clearing an escape path. The SEALs ran along the mountainside, breathing hard while looking up toward the ridge. They could only see a small figure lying prone behind the rifle, never leaving position. The commander's voice was emotional over the radio. "We owe you our lives." Reyna removed her headset, nodding quietly to herself. But the story was more complex than a simple rescue operation. Reyna had violated direct orders by engaging. She'd committed an unauthorized action that could end her military career. Her superiors would demand explanations she wasn't prepared to give. But 12 SEALs were alive, who would have been dead without her intervention. Through her scope, she'd watched these soldiers fight with courage, despite impossible odds. She'd seen them risk their lives to save wounded teammates instead of abandoning them for easier escape. These were the kind of soldiers worth saving, the kind who deserved someone willing to break rules when rules would mean letting good people die. Reyna had learned long ago that sometimes the right action wasn't the authorized action. Her Kraken unit training had taught her to think independently, to make tactical decisions based on battlefield reality rather than distant command decisions. Tonight had been one of those moments when experience trumped orders. As she packed her rifle, Reyna reflected on what had just happened. She'd revealed capabilities she'd been trying to keep hidden. Questions would be asked that she preferred not to answer, but the alternative had been watching 12 soldiers die while she followed orders that made no tactical sense. The radio crackled with encrypted communications as the SEALs reached safe extraction points. Their voices carried relief, gratitude, and curiosity about their mysterious guardian. "Command, we need to identify the sniper who provided overwatch," the SEAL commander transmitted. "Negative. No sniper assets were authorized for your area of operations." "Then we have a guardian angel." Reyna smiled at that phrase. She'd been called many things during her military career, but guardian angel was new. She preferred it to some of the other names she'd earned. The extraction helicopter arrived for the SEALs, its searchlight sweeping across the valley. For a moment, the beam illuminated Reyna's position on the ridge. She didn't try to hide. If they wanted to find her, they would. If they wanted answers, she'd provide them. But what she wouldn't do was apologize for saving lives when she had the capability to do so. Her radio crackled with an encrypted transmission. "Reyna, this is command. Return to base for debrief." They knew, of course they knew. Advanced military technology could track gunfire, analyze ballistics, identify weapons systems. Her unauthorized engagement had been recorded, analyzed, and traced back to her position. The question now wasn't whether she'd be disciplined. The question was whether her superiors valued results over regulations. As Reyna began her descent from the ridge, she felt no regret about her actions. She'd kept a promise to herself. Never let good soldiers die when she could prevent it. Whether that cost her career or not was secondary to the satisfaction of knowing 12 SEALs would see their families again. The rifle on her back had served its purpose once more. Not just as a weapon, but as a tool for preserving life. Some tools were worth the risk of using, regardless of authorization. Some promises were worth keeping, regardless of consequences. The official report stated, "SEAL team extracted safely. No support assets were recorded." Nobody mentioned the shots from the ridge. Days later, in the field mess hall, Reyna sat eating soup alone, her uniform dusty from mountain terrain. The door opened. The SEAL team entered. The atmosphere grew quiet. The commander walked directly to her table, gently placing a cup of black coffee down. He spoke softly, "We're alive. Because of you." The others quietly sat around the table. No mockery, no ridicule. Reyna smiled slightly, continuing her meal. No additional words needed. The conversation that followed was different from any she'd experienced in the military. These weren't just soldiers expressing gratitude. These were professionals acknowledging expertise. "Ma'am," the youngest SEAL said carefully, "we know you're not supposed to discuss what happened, but we want you to know it mattered." Raina nodded. "You would have done the same for me." "Maybe, but we didn't have the skills to do what you did." The commander leaned forward. "Command is asking questions. They want to know how 12 SEALs survived an ambush that should have been fatal. And what are you telling them?" "That we got lucky. That the enemy made tactical mistakes. That we managed better than expected." Raina understood. They were protecting her from official scrutiny, just as she'd protected them from enemy fire. "Will there be consequences for you?" she asked. "There might be. But consequences for lying in a report are preferable to consequences for our guardian getting punished for saving our lives." The respect in their voices was something Raina had rarely experienced. Not just gratitude, but genuine recognition from peers who understood what her actions had required. "We know you're probably not supposed to be here," another SEAL said. "We know you're probably supposed to be somewhere else, doing something else. But we want you to know that if you ever need backup, if you ever need someone to return the favor, you have 12 people who will never forget what you did." Raina finished her coffee. "I hope none of us ever need to test that promise." "So do we. But the offer stands." As the SEALs prepared to leave, the commander placed a small item on the table, a unit patch with 12 signatures on the back. "From all of us," he said simply. Raina looked at the patch, then at the faces around the table. "Thank you." Sometimes recognition didn't require ceremonies or official acknowledgement. Sometimes it just required people who understood the value of what had been done. Some people are dismissed, considered invisible, just support staff. But in life-or-death moments, they're the ones who preserve life for the entire team. Raina Vasquez didn't need medals or official reports. One shot from the ridge was enough to rewrite the truth. SEALs lived because of her. Her story reminds us that heroes often work in the shadows, breaking rules when rules would mean letting good people die. They use their skills not for glory or recognition, but because they refuse to watch others suffer when they can help. The person dismissed as just support might be the most capable person in the room. The quiet professional maintaining equipment might be the expert you need when everything falls apart. Sometimes the right action isn't the authorized action. Sometimes keeping promises to yourself matters more than following orders from people who aren't there to see what's really happening. True guardians don't seek permission to save lives. They just do what's necessary and accept the consequences. If you believe in quiet stories like this one, leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to SN Quiet Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people creating and telling stories, not mass-produced AI.